The glass doors of the Cascade Art Gallery loomed before me, their polished surface reflecting the Seattle skyline's jagged silhouette. My pulse thrummed in my ears, a steady rhythm that matched the city's restless hum. Today wasn't just another exhibition, it was the day I'd sever the chains of a past that had held me captive for too long. My fingers tightened around the frayed strap of my leather satchel, the weight of my sketchbook inside anchoring me to the moment. The gallery's marble steps gleamed under the pale morning sun, and beyond the doors, a crowd buzzed, art critics with sharp pens, collectors with sharper eyes, and onlookers hungry for drama. They didn't know it yet, but I was about to give them a story they'd never forget. I took a deep breath, the crisp air tinged with the scent of rain and coffee from a nearby cart. My faded jacket hung loose over my shoulders, concealing the sleek black dress I'd sewn myself, its sharp lines a quiet rebellion against the woman I used to be. I wasn't nervous, not exactly, but a fire smoldered in my chest, fueled by years of silence. This was my moment to speak. The hallway leading to the main exhibit hall was a chaotic symphony of movement. Gallery staff darted between displays, adjusting frames and muttering about lighting. Reporters with sleek cameras and sharper smiles prowled the edges, their gazes flicking over me, dismissing me as just another struggling artist in scuffed boots. To them, I was invisible, a nobody clutching a worn satchel. But I hadn't come to blend in. Not today. I stepped into the exhibit hall, the air thick with the scent of oil paint and polished wood. My eyes found him immediately, Ethan Caldwell, my ex-fiancé, standing near a towering abstract sculpture that screamed wealth and pretension. His tailored suit hugged his frame, and his laugh, loud and careless, echoed across the room. Beside him stood Vanessa Reed, his new girlfriend, her diamond earrings catching the light as she tossed her auburn hair. She was a socialite with a smile that could charm a snake, and she knew it. Hovering nearby was Ethan's father, Harold Caldwell, a retired tech mogul whose icy stare had always made me feel like an intruder in their world. Vanessa's eyes met mine, and her lips curled into a smug grin, sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, look who crawled out of her studio," she said, her voice dripping with mock surprise. "I didn't think you'd dare show your face, Elena, after, well, everything." I held her gaze, my jaw tight, refusing to take the bait. Harold chuckled, his voice low and venomous. "My son was always meant for greater things than a girl who doodles for pocket change." Ethan crossed his arms, his smirk widening. "She's like a stray cat, scrappy, persistent, but not exactly refined." The words landed like a slap, their sting familiar yet no less sharp. Laughter rippled from a few nearby guests, their glances darting between us like vultures circling a fresh kill. Ethan thought he could break me, just as he had during our years together, when I dimmed my dreams to fit into his polished life. He thought I'd shrink under their scorn, just like the old Elena, the one who'd endured his criticism and Harold's disdain to keep the peace. But he didn't know the woman standing here today, the one who'd clawed her way back from the ashes he'd left behind. My fingers moved to the clasp of my jacket, slow and deliberate. The room's chatter faded, a hush falling as curious eyes turned toward me. I unfastened the buttons, letting the worn fabric slide off my shoulders and pool on the floor. Beneath it, my black dress gleamed, its tailored lines hugging my frame like a second skin. It wasn't just cloth, it was armor, stitched with every late night I'd spent rebuilding myself, every tear I'd turned into resolve. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's smile froze, her eyes narrowing. Harold's jaw tightened, his composure cracking. Ethan's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of unease he couldn't hide. I stepped forward, my boots clicking against the polished floor, my voice steady and clear. "I'm not a stray, Ethan. I'm an artist, and I carve my own destiny." The gallery curator, a wiry woman with a clipboard, broke the silence. "Elena Harper, are you ready to present your piece?" I nodded, my chin high, feeling the weight of every stare. "Absolutely." I crossed the room to a covered canvas at the center of the hall, my heart pounding, but my steps sure. The crowd parted, their whispers buzzing like static. I gripped the cloth and pulled it away, revealing a vibrant oil painting, a woman bursting from a shattered frame, her colors bold and unapologetic, her eyes fierce with defiance. The figure wasn't me, not exactly, but she carried my spirit, my fight. The room erupted in murmurs, some shocked, others awed. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment. I'd done it. I'd shown them who I was. 3 minutes into the video, as the music swells and the camera lingers on Elena's triumphant reveal, the voiceover pauses for a heartfelt call to action. Hey, if you're loving Elena's journey of courage and transformation, hit that subscribe button and join our community for more stories that inspire. Let's keep this fire burning together. I left the gallery hours later, the weight of the day settling into my bones, but my heart lighter than it had been in years. Ethan's cruel words, Vanessa's sneers, Harold's disdain, they couldn't touch me anymore. I was no longer the Elena who'd sacrificed her dreams to please a man who never valued her. The city's evening breeze brushed my skin, carrying the faint salt of the nearby Puget Sound. I tightened my scarf, my boots scuffing the wet pavement, and let my mind drift to the years before Ethan. I grew up in Astoria, a small coastal town in Oregon, where the ocean's roar was my constant companion. My mother, Clara, was a seamstress, her fingers calloused from stitching dresses for wealthier families. My father, Daniel, was a fisherman, his hands smelling of salt and rope. Money was always tight, but our home was warm, filled with laughter and the scratch of my pencil on paper. My father believed in my art, even when I doubted myself. On stormy nights, when the wind howled through our rickety house, he'd sit with me at the kitchen table, watching me sketch on scraps of butcher paper he'd saved from the market. "Elena, you've got a gift," he'd say, his voice rough but warm with pride. "Don't let anyone take that from you. The world needs your colors." But when I was 14, a storm swallowed his boat. The Coast Guard's knock came at dawn, their faces grim as they delivered the news. My mother crumpled, her strength eroded by grief. She buried herself in work, sewing late into the night to pay the bills. I took odd jobs, cleaning houses, folding laundry, scrubbing dishes at a local diner, anything to keep us afloat. My sketchbook became my refuge, a place to pour the pain I couldn't speak. But my mother, practical to a fault, saw art as a luxury we couldn't afford. "Dreams don't pay rent, Elena," she'd say, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "You need a real job, something steady." So I pushed my passion aside, believing survival meant sacrifice. I worked harder, saved every penny, and dreamed of a day when I could paint without guilt. That's when Ethan walked into my life. He strode into the diner where I worked, all charm and confidence, his smile promising a world beyond the grease-stained counters. He was a rising star in Seattle's tech scene, and I was a 20-year-old waitress with paint-stained hands and a heart full of hope. He ordered coffee, lingered longer than necessary, and left a tip that was more than my nightly wages. His compliments felt like sunlight after years of shadow, and when he asked me out, I said yes, dazzled by the life he offered. Ethan swept me into his glittering world, fancy dinners at restaurants with unpronounceable menus, art galas where I felt like an imposter in borrowed dresses. He proposed 6 months later, a diamond ring glinting under chandelier light, and I thought I'd found my escape. I quit the diner, moved into his sleek downtown apartment, and tried to be the perfect fiancé. But Ethan's charm faded fast. He criticized my art, called it a hobby, and expected me to play the role of a polished trophy partner. Harold, his father, never let me forget I was beneath them, his barbed comments slicing away at my confidence. "You're lucky Ethan chose you," he'd say, his voice cold. "Don't embarrass him." I tried to fit in, dimming my dreams to keep the peace. But then I found out about Vanessa. I caught them at a gala, her hand on his arm, their laughter intimate and exclusive. When I confronted Ethan, he didn't even flinch. "You're too plain for my life, Elena," he said, his voice cruel. "Vanessa fits the part. She's got class, ambition. You're just... you." The words shattered me. I left that night, taking only my art supplies and a suitcase of clothes. I moved into a cramped studio apartment, its walls peeling but its windows letting in soft morning light. There I began to rebuild, stitch by stitch, painting by painting. Now, standing outside the gallery, I'd closed that chapter. My painting had sold to a collector for a sum that left me dizzy, enough to cover rent for a year. I was free not just from Ethan, but from the version of myself I'd left behind. The next morning, an email pinged in my inbox, the subject line bold, Commission opportunity. It was from Julian Tate, a renowned architect whose firm, Tate Designs, was reshaping Seattle's skyline. He'd seen my gallery piece and wanted me to create a mural for his new headquarters, a project that could launch my career into orbit. My hands trembled as I dialed his number, the phone cool against my ear. "Elena, this is Julian," a calm, rich voice answered. "Your work last night was extraordinary. I'd love for you to create a mural for our lobby, something bold, something that tells a story." "I'd be honored," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can you share more details?" "It's a large-scale piece, maybe inspired by urban renewal, the city's pulse. My daughter, Lila, loves art, so I'd like her input. Can you meet us tomorrow at our office?" I agreed, jotting down the address with a hand that shook with excitement. The next day, I stood before a sleek skyscraper in downtown Seattle, its glass facade reflecting the clouds scudding across the sky. The lobby was a blend of modern elegance, marble floors, steel accents, and a faint hum of ambition. Julian greeted me, his warm smile easing the knot in my chest. He was tall, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that put me at ease. Beside him stood Lila, a 10-year-old with a riot of curls and a sketchbook clutched to her chest. "Hi, Elena," Lila said shyly, holding up a drawing of a cityscape bursting with color, blues and golds swirling like a dream. "I want the mural to feel like this." I knelt to her level, smiling. "That's beautiful, Lila. Let's make something magical together." As we discussed ideas, a woman approached, her heels clicking sharply on the marble. Celeste Tate, Julian's wife, exuded polished confidence in a tailored blazer and pearl earrings. Her blonde hair was swept into a flawless chignon, but her smile was tight, her green eyes assessing me like I was a puzzle she didn't trust. "I didn't realize we'd hired an artist already," Celeste said, her tone cool as she glanced at Julian. "You should have consulted me." "It was a last-minute decision," Julian replied smoothly, unfazed. "Elena's work is exceptional. I saw her piece at the gallery." Celeste's gaze lingered on me, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Interesting choice. You don't seem like the usual artists we work with." I swallowed the urge to retort, keeping my voice even. "I'm here to create something your firm will love." She gave a thin smile, then turned away, her heels echoing as she left. But not before I caught a glance she shot Julian, sharp, almost calculating, like a warning. The air felt heavier, as if I'd stepped into a space where secrets simmered just beneath the surface. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with Lila, sketching designs for the mural in a corner of the firm's lobby. She was a burst of creativity, her ideas sparking my own, trees woven into skyscrapers, rivers flowing through streets. Julian was supportive, often stopping by to check our progress, his presence steady and kind. He'd bring coffee, ask about my process, and share stories about Lila's love for drawing. But Celeste remained a mystery. She was polite when we crossed paths, but her interactions were laced with subtle barbs, her smiles never quite reaching her eyes. One afternoon, as I blended colors on a test canvas, an older woman approached, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She leaned on a polished ebony cane, her eyes sharp despite the lines etched into her face. Her navy dress was simple but elegant, carrying the air of someone who'd seen the world and wasn't impressed by much of it. "You're the artist," she said, her voice low but firm, like she was stating a fact rather than asking. "I'm Vivian Tate, Julian's mother." I stood, wiping paint from my hands. "Nice to meet you, Miss Tate. I'm Elena." Vivian studied my sketch, her expression unreadable. "Art reveals truth, you know," she said, her voice softening. "Even when people try to bury it." Her words hung in the air, cryptic and heavy, like a riddle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. Before I could respond, Julian appeared, his face tightening at the sight of his mother. "Mom, you should rest. The stairs are tough on you these days." Vivian waved him off, her eyes still on me. "I'm fine, Julian. I was just talking to Elena about truth." Julian's smile was strained as he guided her away, but Vivian's words stuck with me, burrowing into my thoughts. What truth was she hinting at? And why did she look at me like I was the key to unlocking it? The next day, I was in the firm's library, sketching under the glow of a brass lamp when Vivian found me again. She closed the heavy oak door behind her, her movements deliberate. Her eyes were intense, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "I know I seem like a frail old woman," she said, her voice steady, "but I see things, Elena. Things others miss. Celeste isn't who she seems. She's planning something, and Julian's too trusting to notice." I froze, my pencil hovering over the paper. "What do you mean?" Vivian leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I found papers in her office, transfers to an offshore account under Vantage Corporation. Large sums, millions. I think she's siphoning money from Julian's firm." My heart raced. "Why tell me? Why not Julian?" Vivian's face hardened. "Because he won't listen to me. He thinks I'm just paranoid, that my memory's slipping. But I was a lawyer for 30 years, Elena. I know a scheme when I see one." She handed me a folded note, her hand steady despite her age. I opened it to find a list of account numbers, scribbled in precise handwriting. "Check her office," she said. "Find proof. I can't do it myself, not anymore." I stared at the paper, my mind spinning. This wasn't my fight. I was here to paint a mural, not play detective in a family drama. But Vivian's urgency gnawed at me, her eyes pleading for someone to believe her. What if she was right? What if Julian and Lila were in danger? "I'll think about it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Vivian nodded, as if she'd expected that answer. "Thank you, Elena." That night, under the pretense of needing more supplies from my car, I lingered at the firm after hours. The lobby was eerily quiet, the city's lights glittering through the glass walls. Celeste's office was on the top floor, its glass door locked. I'd seen Lila use a spare key earlier that week, hidden in a desk drawer, and I borrowed it, my pulse pounding as I slipped inside. The room was pristine, glass desk, sleek laptop, and a stack of files arranged with military precision. The air carried a faint trace of Celeste's perfume, floral but sharp. I moved quickly, placing a tiny camera behind a decorative sculpture on a shelf, angling it to capture the desk. My hands trembled as I adjusted the lens, every creak of the building making me jump. As I turned to leave, a folder on the desk caught my eye, labeled Vantage Corp in bold letters. My breath hitched. I wasn't one to snoop, but Vivian's warning echoed in my mind. I opened the folder, revealing documents about a merger, Julian's firm signing over assets to an unknown entity. The terms were dense, but one line stood out: transfer of controlling interest to Vantage Corp, effective upon signature. My stomach dropped. Someone was trying to strip Julian of his company. I snapped photos with my phone, my hands shaking, then replaced the folder exactly as I'd found it. I left the office, locking the door behind me, my heart pounding like a drum. Back in my apartment, I couldn't sleep, the images of those documents burned into my mind. The next morning, I checked the camera footage from my laptop, my coffee growing cold beside me. For hours, it showed nothing but an empty office, the city's skyline glowing beyond the glass. Then, just after midnight, the door opened and Celeste appeared. She sat at her desk, her face illuminated by the laptop's glow. She dialed a number, her voice cold and clipped. "Everything's on track," she said. "Julian signs the papers tomorrow. Vantage Corp will take control." A man's voice crackled through the speaker, low and smooth. "Good. Once it's done, we'll move to phase 2. My blood ran cold. Phase 2? What did that mean? I leaned closer, turning up the volume. Celeste paused, her fingers tapping the desk. "What about Vivian?" "She's asking questions. She's sharper than Julian thinks." "Don't worry," the man said, his tone chillingly calm. "If she gets too close, we'll handle her." Quietly. I gasped, my hands trembling so badly I nearly knocked over my coffee. This wasn't just about money, it was dangerous, maybe even deadly. Vivian was right. Celeste was playing a game, and Julian and Lila were pawns. I had to tell him. That afternoon, I found Julian in the lobby, reviewing blueprints with an engineer. His smile faded when he saw my face. "Elena, what's wrong?" I pulled him aside, my voice low. "Julian, we need to talk. It's about Celeste." His brow furrowed. "What's going on?" I handed him my phone, the footage already cued. His face darkened as Celeste's words played, her betrayal laid bare in crisp audio. When the recording ended, he set the phone down, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. "Have you shown this to anyone else?" he asked, his voice low. "No," I said. "But we need to protect Vivian and Lila." "Now." Julian nodded, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and determination. "Stay here tonight. I don't know what Celeste will do when she realizes she's been caught." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. I'd stepped into something far bigger than I'd intended, but there was no turning back. Later that evening, we gathered in Julian's office, me, Julian, and a man he introduced as Marcus Reed, his head of security. Marcus was tall, with a calm demeanor that belied the sharpness in his eyes. Julian played the footage for him, and Marcus listened in silence, his face unreadable. "I had my suspicions about Celeste," Marcus said when the recording ended. "She's been meeting with some shady contacts, but I didn't have proof until now." Julian's fists tightened. "I'm confronting her tonight. I need to know why." Marcus nodded. "I'll stay close. If she reacts unpredictably, I'll handle it." We found Celeste in her office, typing furiously on her laptop. She looked up as we entered, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Julian, Marcus, and me. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with suspicion. Julian didn't hesitate. He placed his phone on her desk and hit play. Celeste's face paled as her own voice filled the room, her conversation with the mystery man echoing off the glass walls. Her composure cracked, her hand trembling on the keyboard. "You spied on me?" she hissed, standing, her eyes flashing with fury. "You're going to trust some nobody artist over your own wife?" Julian's voice was steel. "I trusted you, Celeste. I gave you my family, my life. And you betrayed me." Celeste laughed, the sound bitter and sharp, like glass shattering. "You think this is about you? This is about my brother. Your father framed him for fraud, left him to rot in prison for a crime he didn't commit. I married you to take everything your family built, to destroy it from the inside." The room froze. Vivian, who'd slipped into the office unnoticed, spoke from the doorway, her voice steady despite her frail frame. "Your brother was guilty, Celeste. I defended him in court, but he wouldn't take a plea deal. He chose his path." Celeste's eyes blazed as she grabbed a heavy paperweight from her desk, its crystal surface glinting. She lunged toward Vivian, her face twisted with rage. I shouted, my heart lurching, but Marcus was faster. He stepped forward, grabbing Celeste's wrist and twisting it until the paperweight clattered to the floor. Julian moved to shield Vivian, his face pale but resolute. "It's over, Celeste," Julian said, his voice low. Celeste struggled against Marcus's grip, her eyes wild. "You don't know anything," she spat. "Vantage Corp isn't just me. You'll never stop them." Marcus called security, and within minutes, they arrived, restraining Celeste as she screamed, her carefully crafted facade crumbling. As they led her away, I exhaled, my legs trembling. But one question lingered. If Celeste was just a piece of the puzzle, who was behind Vantage Corp? Weeks later, I stood in a packed courtroom, the air thick with tension. Ethan sat across from me, his smug expression barely masking the unease in his eyes. He'd contested our engagement's dissolution, claiming I had no right to the assets we'd shared, savings I'd contributed to during our years together. But Vivian, a retired lawyer with a mind sharper than most, had offered to represent me. She stood beside me, her presence steady as she presented evidence of Ethan's deceit, bank statements showing he'd funneled our joint savings into Vanessa's lavish lifestyle, jewelry, trips, a sports car registered in her name. The judge, a stern woman with wire-rimmed glasses, reviewed the documents, her expression unreadable. Ethan's lawyer argued, his voice dripping with arrogance, but Vivian countered with precision, her words cutting through his bluster like a blade. "Your Honor," Vivian said, "Mr. Caldwell misused shared assets for personal gain, violating the terms of their financial agreement. Ms. Harper deserves full restitution." The courtroom stirred, whispers rippling through the gallery. Ethan's face paled, his hands clenching the table. The judge's gavel fell, her voice firm. After reviewing the evidence, the court rules in favor of Ms. Harper. Mr. Caldwell is ordered to repay the misused funds, and the engagement is officially dissolved. I exhaled, a weight lifting from my chest. I'd won not just the money, but my freedom, my justice. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the midday sun warmed my face, the city's pulse thrumming around me. Vivian walked beside me, her cane tapping the pavement. "You did well, Elena," she said, her voice soft but proud. I smiled, gratitude swelling in my chest. "Thank you, Vivian. I couldn't have done this without you." Julian waited outside, holding 2 steaming coffees. He handed me one, his smile gentle. "How does it feel to start over?" I took a sip, the warmth spreading through me. "Like I can finally breathe." He nodded, his eyes warm. "I've got an idea. How about a studio space for your art? No strings attached, just a place to create." I looked at him, a spark of hope igniting. "Only if you visit." In the months that followed, my life transformed. The mural I painted for Julian's lobby became a landmark, its vibrant cityscape, trees woven into skyscrapers, rivers flowing through streets, drawing praise from clients and critics. Lila's ideas shone through, her joy infectious, as we unveiled it together. My career took off, with commissions pouring in from galleries and private collectors. I moved into a new studio, its walls lined with canvases bursting with color. Julian and I grew closer, our bond built on trust and quiet moments, walks through Pike Place Market, late-night talks over coffee, laughter shared under the city's rainy skies. He never pushed, never tried to control me the way Ethan had. He saw me, not as a trophy or a project, but as Elena, the artist, the woman. One evening, as I added final touches to the mural, Julian appeared, a small box in his hand. The lobby was quiet, the city's lights glittering through the glass. He knelt, his eyes steady and warm, and my heart skipped a beat. "Elena," he said, his voice soft but sure, "you've shown me what courage looks like. You walked into my life and changed everything, not just for me, but for Lila, for my family. I want to build a future with you, side by side. Will you marry me?" Tears welled as I looked at him, the man who'd seen my strength when I doubted it myself. The ring in the box was simple, elegant, glinting under the lobby's soft light. I nodded, my voice a whisper. "Yes." He stood, slipping the ring onto my finger, and pulled me into his arms. For the first time in years, I felt truly home, not in a place, but in a moment, in a person. We stepped outside, hand in hand, the city's pulse wrapping around us. I'd broken free from my past, faced betrayal, and found my strength. My art, once a quiet dream, now told my story to the world. I'd weathered the storm, and the path ahead was mine to paint. What do you think of Elena's journey? Did she make the right choice to reclaim her life and trust again? Share your thoughts in the comments and follow for more stories of resilience, courage, and triumph.